Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into the weeds on a timeline that's, well, famously complex and debated.
That's right. We're talking about the Great Tribulation.
Exactly. We got some fascinating source material here drawing from Daniel, Matthew 24, Thessalonians, Revelation, all trying to map out this final period of judgment.
And our mission, really, is to hone in on one core question, isn't it? When does this intense suffering, what the sources call the Great Tribulation, or the Wanlin in Korean, actually begin?
Right, and crucially, when does it definitively end for believers? That's the key takeaway we need to nail down.
Absolutely. Everything kind of hinges on pinning down the exact trigger events. It's not vague. The sources point to specific occurrences.
Okay, so let's set the scene first. The whole endgame, according to these interpretations, plays out within a specific 7-year window, right? The last week.
Correct. The last week. But, and this is critical right off the bat, the sources make it very clear that there are two different kinds of suffering within those 7 years.
Different kinds how?
Based on who is suffering, primarily. First, you have what's explicitly called the Great Tribulation. This is described as an affliction, a testing period, mainly focused on the saints, the Seongdo-dul.
Okay, focus on believers. What's the second type?
After the Great Tribulation concludes for the saints, there's a period the sources label the 7 plagues. Now, this is described as suffering that's actually far greater, far more intense than the Great Tribulation.
Greater, wow. Okay.
Significantly more severe. But, and this is the key distinction, it's reserved only for the wicked, the Akindul. Specifically, it targets those who've taken the mark of the beast and worshipped his image.
So that's a massive theological point. The suffering directed by the Antichrist figure, the beast, is separate from the final direct outpouring of God's wrath, which is the 7 plagues.
Precisely. The 42 months of beast-led persecution are distinct from the final judgments, and that separation fuels the whole debate about timing. Where do those 42 months of persecution actually fit within the 7 years?
Got it. So, to figure that out, we need to know exactly when the clock starts ticking on the Great Tribulation itself. What are the trigger events?
According to these sources, it's not just one thing. It's the convergence of 3 major symbolic events happening essentially at the same time.
Okay, lay them out for us. Event number 1.
Event 1, the establishment of the abomination of desolation, the Mayolmengi Gojonghanjot.
What does that actually entail, according to the sources? What is the abomination?
It's presented as the ultimate act of blasphemy, set up right in the holy place, presumably a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem.
Okay, setting up the abomination. What's number 2?
Number 2 is intrinsically linked. The son of destruction, Mayolmengwi Adul, the Antichrist figure, actually enters this temple, this Jianwulta Songjin, sits down and publicly proclaims himself to be God.
Wow, that's not subtle.
Not at all. It's the overt act of a created being attempting to usurp the creator's place, the ultimate rebellion.
And the third event, you said there were 3?
The third is the practical liturgical trigger. This same figure prohibits the daily sacrifices and offerings, the Jezawayimol. He forcibly stops the established religious rituals.
Ah, okay, so it's the physical stopping of the worship system.
Exactly. When those 3 things align, abomination set up, Antichrist claims divinity in the temple, sacrifices stopped that moment, according to these sources, marks the official start of the Great Tribulation for the saints. It's the absolute linchpin.
But hang on, the sources don't suggest this Antichrist figure just strolls into a peaceful world and takes over, do they?
Oh, absolutely not. Quite the opposite. The sources are emphatic that he only gains this power, this acceptance, because the world has already descended into such unimaginable chaos.
He's seen as a savior because everything is falling apart.
Precisely. He rises to power against a backdrop of utter ruin. So before we even get to the tribulation proper, the world goes through this horrific prelude.
Okay, so let's unpack that prelude. Before the specific persecution of believers really ramps up the Great Tribulation itself, the world has to be, well, almost destroyed first. What does that look like?
It's brutal. The initial judgments aren't slow. They're depicted as immediate and catastrophic. The sources describe an initial wave of judgment that wipes out approximately 1/4 of the entire global population.
1/4. Just like that.
Just like that. Billions of people gone very quickly. It sets the stage for total systemic collapse.
And how does this happen? Is it one event or?
It's driven by that classic terrifying combination often linked to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. 4 specific means.
Okay, what are they?
First, the sword. War. Global conflict on a scale we can barely imagine.
Right. War leads to.
Famine. Human yon. Supply lines shatter, agriculture collapses under the weight of conflict, starvation becomes rampant.
Makes sense. War, famine,
What's third?
death. But here it seems to represent widespread disease, plagues, pandemics, Seimeng, or Junyeonbyung, sweeping through populations already weakened by war and hunger. A grim picture. And the fourth one, you said 4.
The fourth is, well, it's interesting, the wild beasts of the earth. Tangli Jimsum.
Wild beasts.
Ah.
How does that fit in? Like actual animal attacks accounting for mass death.
It's likely symbolic of a total breakdown of order, you know? When a quarter of humanity is gone, the structures that keep the natural world in check just crumble.
Ah, I see. So civilization collapses and the natural world encroaches, becomes hostile.
Exactly. Famine drives predators closer, disease weakens defenses, ecological balance is gone. It signifies total chaos, nature itself turning against the remnants of humanity.
And critically, the sources mention that even during this period, this initial die-off, believers are already being killed. Martyrdom, Thunkyo, is already happening steadily.
Yes, that's a key point. This isn't a time of safety before the storm. The suffering has begun. Revelation's fifth seal, the souls under the altar crying out, that's often linked to these early martyrs.
So the suffering is ongoing, just not at peak intensity yet.
Correct. But then the ecological disasters really kick in. The trumpet judgments. This is where the planet itself starts to unravel.
Okay, let's walk through those. The ecological breakdown sounds terrifying.
It is. The first trumpet hits the very foundation of the food chain. Vegetation. The sources say 1/3 of the earth burns.
A third.
A third. Consuming 1/3 of the trees and, significantly, all green grass. Imagine the impact. Massive wildfires, erosion, loss of grazing land, crops wiped out.
Immediate catastrophic food shortages worldwide.
Absolutely. Then the second trumpet hits the oceans. We're told 1/3 of the sea turns to blood. Para il sambunui ilipicaduenda.
Turns to blood, like literally, or is that symbolic of death?
It likely signifies mass death and pollution. 1/3 of all sea life dies, and interestingly, 1/3 of all ships are destroyed too.
So land agriculture is devastated, and now 1/3 of marine resources are gone, plus shipping is crippled. That's compounding disaster.
Precisely. And then the third trumpet targets freshwater. A great star named Wormwood falls, and 1/3 of the rivers and springs turn bitter. Sukura bayanhanda.
Bitter like. Undrinkable. Poisonous.
Effectively poisonous, yes. Making drinking water scarce and irrigation impossible across huge areas. The sources say many die from this water.
Okay, this is grim. No food from land, limited food from the sea. 1/3 of fresh water is toxic. Human survival is looking precarious.
Extremely. And it doesn't stop there. The fourth trumpet affects the heavens.
How so?
1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars are struck, darkened. Daylight is reduced by 1/3, moonlight and starlight by 1/3.
That seems almost secondary after the water and food crises.
Huh?
Why is dimming the lights by 1/3 such a significant judgment here?
Well, think about it. It feeds back into the food crisis. Less sunlight means severely hampered photosynthesis for any remaining vegetation.
Ah, right. So the food problem gets even worse. Irreversibly worse, probably.
Exactly. And imagine the psychological impact. A world that's literally darker, colder, day and night. It's a constant, visible reminder of judgment, amplifying fear and despair.
So the world is spiraling down. War, famine, plague, poison water, darkness, billions dead.
It reaches a point of near total destruction, Mayalmanghal to Kachachi.
And then things get even uglier on a human level. The sources describe a period of just rampant lawlessness, murder, and crime, Selyukwa, Chananhan, Byumsho Dul. Society utterly breaks down.
But even that isn't the final pre-Antichrist judgment, is it? There's something specific aimed at the unsealed.
Correct. This is that horrifying 5-month period involving the locusts from the abyss, the Flangchung.
Right, the scorpion-like sting. What's the focus here?
These beings are allowed to torment specifically the people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. 5 months of agonizing scorpion-like pain.
But the truly chilling detail the sources highlight
Is that they cannot die. Jasaljuka Bugarankara. Suicide is impossible. It's 5 months of inescapable conscious agony, a torment designed to break the human spirit completely. That inability to die, that's psychological torture on a whole other level.
It really is. And after those 5 months of torment end, even more death.
How many more?
An additional 1/3 of the remaining world population dies. Think about the cumulative effect. A quarter gone initially, more lost through the trumpet judgments, and now another third of whoever is left. Humanity's presence is decimated.
It's almost unimaginable. And this level of sustained global catastrophe is what sets the stage for the Antichrist figure.
Exactly. The sources argue that it's only when all significant opposition to the son of destruction, Mailmangwi Adul, has been eliminated through these judgments that a semblance of global peace, Pyongwaga Omyeon, finally arrives.
Peace brokered by him.
It seems so. Humanity, battered and desperate for any kind of stability after enduring all this, is psychologically primed to welcome anyone who promises order.
So when this figure, the abomination of desolation, steps forward, offering peace to a dying world,
He's embraced. Enthusiastically, he's not seen as the cause of the problem, but as the solution, the only hope for survival.
and he takes control of this shattered world, forms his global beast government.
The Segai Jimsung Jumbu.
And that's when the last week officially begins, bringing us to the Great Tribulation itself.
Right. So the stage is finally set. The son of destruction is in charge. He controls the global government. He walks into the temple, declares himself God, stops the sacrifices. The Great Tribulation begins.
And the Bible, particularly Revelation, is very specific about how long he has this authority, isn't it?
Extremely specific. He is granted authority to act, to wage war, to blaspheme for exactly 42 months.
42 months, or 1,260 days, using another common prophetic measure.
Correct. That duration is fixed. It's non-negotiable in the text. The controversy, the huge debate, is about where those 42 months fall within the 7-year last week.
And this hinges, incredibly, on how you translate a single phrase in the book of Daniel.
That's right. Daniel 9.27, it talks about a figure confirming a covenant for 1 week, 7 years, and then says, in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. The ambiguity lies in that phrase, half of the week, hiriwi jelbon. Does it mean he stops sacrifices for the duration of half the week, the first half? Or does it mean he stops them at the exact midpoint of the week?
Ah, I see. That makes a world of difference to the timeline.
A world of difference. It literally determines whether believers face intense persecution for 3.5 years or potentially just for a few days.
Okay, let's break down these two views clearly. View 1, which you mentioned the source material seems to favor.
View 1. Tribulation starts immediately. This is the half-duration view. It interprets half of the week as meaning for the duration of half the week. Iri Yolban Dongan.
So, under this view, the moment the 7-year week begins, the Antichrist confirms his covenant, immediately enters the temple, sets up the abomination, stops the sacrifices, and claims divinity.
Yes, day 1, essentially. This means the entire first 42 months, the front half week, Jonban Il, is the Great Tribulation period for the saints.
Beast worship is enforced from the very beginning of the 7 years.
Correct. The covenant Daniel mentions might be seen as the global agreement accepting his leadership, which he then immediately violates with his self-deification, kicking off the persecution. This aligns the full 42 months of his authority directly with the tribulation of the elect. It's a long, sustained test.
Okay, that's view 1. What's the alternative? The one perhaps more historically common.
View 2. Tribulation starts midweek. This is the midpoint view. It interprets half of the week as meaning at the precise midpoint of the week, Irui Jolban Sijiome.
So in this scenario, the first 3.5 years are what? Relatively peaceful.
Relatively, yes. The Antichrist figure might be consolidating power, the covenant is in effect, maybe temple sacrifices are even allowed to continue during this initial period.
And then exactly halfway through the 7 years.
Boom, he breaks the covenant, marches into the temple, sets up the abomination, stops the sacrifices, demands worship. The persecution begins only then, at the 3.5-year mark.
The implication for believers here is huge, isn't it? If the 42 months of intense persecution only start midway, and the rapture, the first resurrection, happens shortly after that,
then the actual period of intense suffering for the saints, the Great Tribulation they experience, could be incredibly short. Just a matter of days, Maya Kulman, before they're removed.
beast worship is demanded, but they're taken out almost immediately after it starts.
That's the logic of view 2. The prophesied 42 months of persecution would technically unfold during the second half of the week, but the saints wouldn't be there for almost any of it.
But as you said, the sources we're looking at argue strongly against this. Why?
They see it as inconsistent with the sheer scale and purpose of the tribulation described elsewhere. The descriptions of intense worldwide persecution, the need for divine protection over a long period, it seems to demand more than just a few days of trial. The 42-month duration feels necessary for the prophetic narrative to hold together, in their view.
Right, but regardless of when it starts, day 1 or midpoint, the fact remains. The beast has exactly 42 months of sanctioned authority to act.
Exactly. 42 months to speak great things, blaspheme God, wage war on the saints, and enforce worship.
And he doesn't do this alone, right? There's the other figure, the false prophet.
Crucial figure. The second beast, or Darien Jimsung, he's the propaganda minister, the master of deception.
What does he do?
The sources paint a vivid picture. He performs great signs and wonders, even making fire come down from heaven specifically to deceive the people of the earth. Mihak Hamil.
Deception was already happening during the chaos, but this is amplified.
Massively amplified. It becomes the great deception Damihak. So powerful, the Bible warns it could deceive even the elect, if that were possible. It suggests the battle is spiritual and psychological, not just physical.
Using miracles to justify the beast's authority and worship.
Precisely. It's a combination of awe-inspiring deception and brute force, because the consequence for seeing through the deception is dire.
What happens to those who refuse?
Those who refuse the mark of the beast, Pearol Bachi Anihanyunaya, or refuse to worship the image he sets up. The sentence is death. The Jigye Hadora. The global government mandates execution for non-compliance. Zero tolerance. #tag4. The persecution and protection of the saints.
So let's focus on that period of persecution, the Great Tribulation itself. Whether it's 42 months or a few days, the descriptions are consistently horrific.
Absolutely. The language used is extreme, meant to convey something beyond normal human experience. It's called an affliction unprecedented since the beginning of the world, and never to be equaled again. Chengso Baheo, Jigam Kaji, Irion, Huanlanai, Iabziasko.
Yeah, they're active persecution, not just hardship.
Very active. The sources mention saints being killed by the sword, burned alive, captured, imprisoned, their property plundered. Kalogwa Bokakwa Sarjapimgwa Yaktal El Dankayo. It sounds like systematic extermination.
Which, again, seems hard to accomplish globally in just a few days.
Exactly. That brings us back to the arguments supporting the longer 42-month duration view 1. If the tribulation is meant to be this great, this ultimate test of faith under maximum pressure, a few days just doesn't seem to fit the scriptural weight given to it.
And the source material connects this duration to specific divine interventions, right? Protections put in place.
Yes. Two key elements strongly suggest a longer time frame is needed. First, the ministry of the two witnesses, the Aizhongyin.
Okay, what's their role?
Revelation says they are given power to prophesy for 1,260 days.
Exactly 42 months, the same duration.
Precisely. They prophesy dressed in sackcloth, signifying mourning and repentance. But they aren't passive. They have incredible power. They can devour their enemies with fire from their mouth, shut up the heavens so it doesn't rain, turn waters into blood, and strike the earth with plagues.
Sounds like they're equipped for serious conflict.
That's the argument. The sources interpret their primary function as actively fighting against the beast's forces and providing both spiritual encouragement and potentially physical protection for the saints during this intense 1,260-day persecution.
And how does this argue against the midpoint start view 2?
Well, think about it. If the beast and the abomination are only set up halfway through the 7 years, what are the two witnesses doing for the first 1,260 days?
Good point.
If the first 3.5 years are relatively peaceful under the covenant, why does God commission these two incredibly powerful, divinely protected figures with exactly 1,260 days of wartime authority? Who are they fighting? Why do they need power to devour enemies if the main enemy hasn't revealed himself yet?
It creates a narrative disconnect.
A huge one. Their 1,260-day commission only makes sense if the persecution is happening during those 1,260 days.
And there's also the mention of a place of safety for believers.
Yes. Revelation 12 speaks of the woman often interpreted as the faithful remnant, be it Israel or the church, fleeing into the wilderness to a place prepared by God, a refuge, Yibichio, where she is nourished for. Guess how long?
Let me guess. 1,260 days.
Exactly, 1,260 days. Again, why provide a protected refuge for 3.5 years if the intense danger only lasts for a few days at the end of that period? It implies a sustained threat matching the duration of the refuge.
Okay, that's compelling. Any other time markers?
Yes, the activity of the archangel Michael. Migael.
The protector of Israel and Daniel.
Right. Daniel 12 says, Michael, the great prince who stands watch over your people, will arise. And at that time, there will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations. Until then, Geguk Iroro, Iobsdion, Huanlaniel Geosia.
Another reference to that unprecedented trouble.
And Daniel connects Michael's standing up in this period of trouble to the timeline of a time, times, and half a time.
Which is?
Yet another prophetic code for 3.5 years. 1 plus 2 plus 0.5 equals 3.5 years or 42 months or 1,260 days.
So the argument builds. The beast's authority is 42 months. The two witnesses' ministry is 1,260 days. The place of refuge is for 1,260 days. Michael's specific intervention covers a time, times, and half a time. They all align.
Correct. The sources argue that if the persecution were only a few days long, view 2, all these specific 3.5-year timers become prophetically redundant or inexplicable. This cumulative evidence strongly pushes the interpretation towards view 1. The Great Tribulation is the first 42 months.
A sustained, unprecedented period of spiritual and physical testing.
That's the picture painted. Now, amidst all this, Daniel was given some very specific numbers about the end of this period, numbers that offer a fixed point of hope.
Right, let's get to those. They start counting from when the abomination is set up.
Yes, the clock starts ticking from the moment the daily sacrifices are stopped and the abomination of desolation is established. Daniel is given 2 key day counts from that point.
What's the first one?
First, he's told that 1,290 days must be endured or will pass. The specific event at the 1,290-day mark isn't explicitly defined, but it's a significant milestone after the abomination begins. Some link it to a cleansing or a shift in power.
Okay, 1,290 days. But there's another, more significant number.
Yes, the crucial one for believers. 1,335 days. Daniel 12.1 says, "Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. Gideryosio ilchian sambai samsipo ilkaji orionun ge sarmeun bogi isurira."
Blessed. Why is that day specifically called blessed? What happens?
The sources are absolutely clear on this point. The 1,335th day is blessed because it marks the end of the Great Tribulation for the saints via the first resurrection, the Iljibuwal.
This is the rapture event.
Yes, this event happens at the sound of the last trumpet, which corresponds to the 7th trumpet judgment in Revelation.
And how does Christ return?
Significantly, at this point, he descends only to the air. Gangjong Yur Kajiman im Hasinda. He doesn't come all the way to the earth's surface yet.
The believers.
The dead in Christ are resurrected first, then the living saints who endured are caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Gangjong Eseo Jerul Yongjabaj Hasarini. This is their ultimate deliverance from the tribulation.
So the big takeaway here, regardless of whether someone leans towards view 1 or view 2 for the start,
is the fixed endpoint. Once that abomination goes up, count 1,335 days. That day brings the blessed deliverance of the first resurrection. It's a definite countdown.
Okay, but wait. If the beast's authority is 1,260 days, and Daniel mentions 1,290 days, and the blessed event is at 1,335 days, there's a gap. 75 days between the end of the beast's rule and the rapture, and 45 days between the 1,290 and 1,335 marks. What's happening in those gaps?
That's a point of much discussion. The sources acknowledge these gaps. The 1,290-day mark might signify the official end of the desolation, perhaps a cleansing event. The extra 45 days to reach 1,335, or the 75 days after the beast's 1,260-day reign technically ends. Well, it's often seen as a transitional period.
Transitional how?
Perhaps a time for final preparations, or maybe events need to unfold on Earth even after the beast's direct authority over the saints is curtailed. It could be the final stretch of endurance, proving faithfulness right to the very end before the deliverance. The focus remains on reaching that blessed 335th day.
The final waiting period, enduring until the very end.
Absolutely. And the significance of that 335th day, the first resurrection, it's not just about escape for the saints. It acts as a massive pivot point in the entire end times narrative.
How so?
It marks the absolute definitive end of the Great Tribulation for believers. Their trial is over. And according to the sources, their removal immediately triggers the next and final phase of judgment upon the earth.
This is where the 7 plagues come in.
Exactly. The 7 plagues, or Chiljiang, also referred to as the third woe, Set Jehua. The moment the saints are caught up, the bowls of God's wrath begin to be poured out.
And this period constitutes the second half of the 7-year week, the back half week.
Correct. The Huban, the Al-Ir. And remember that crucial distinction we made earlier. This period of suffering, the 7 plagues, is reserved only for the wicked.
Not for the saints, they're gone.
They're gone. This is specifically for those left behind who took the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. They endured, or perhaps even thrived under the beast's reign, but now they face something far worse.
You mentioned earlier the sources describe these plagues as greater suffering than the Great Tribulation under the beast. Why is that? It seems counterintuitive.
It's about the source of the suffering. The Great Tribulation, terrible as it was inflicted by a created being, the beast, empowered by Satan. It was, in a sense, creaturely antagonism permitted by God for testing.
Okay.
The 7 plagues, however, are depicted as the direct, unmediated, fierce wrath of God himself, Hananimuijino, poured out from heaven. The sources explicitly state this phase is more severe than the beast's persecution, Jimsung Kongshiboda Deo Simhan Daiwanlan Ida. It's divine judgment, pure and simple, without any element of testing or redemption for those experiencing it.
Right. Purely punitive. So what do these plagues involve? Let's detail the escalation.
It starts very personally. The first plague directly targets the beast's followers. Malignant sores, Akago Dakan Han, break out on everyone who has the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. Immediate, painful, visible marking of their allegiance.
Ouch. Okay, what's next? More ecological disaster.
Oh yes, but total this time. Remember how a third of the sea turned to blood earlier? Now the entire remaining sea turns into the blood of a dead man. Everything left in it dies. Utter devastation of marine ecosystems.
Everything. Wow.
Everything. And then the same happens to freshwater. All rivers and springs turn to blood. Not just a third anymore, 100%. The water crisis becomes absolute. Survival becomes biologically impossible for large populations.
Unimaginable. What's the fourth plague?
The sun. Remember how it was dimmed by a third before? Now it gets amplified. The fourth bowl gives the sun power to scorch people with fierce heat.
So darkness and cold before, now unbearable heat.
Exactly. Intense heat tormenting humanity. And yet the text notes, they still curse God and refuse to repent. It highlights the hardened hearts and the purely judicial nature of these plagues.
No turning back at this point. What's plague number 5?
This one seems aimed directly at the beast's power structure. The fifth bowl plunges the throne of the beast and his entire kingdom into thick darkness.
Darkness again, but different this time.
Apparently. This darkness is accompanied by intense agony. People gnaw their tongues because of the pain in their sores, yet still curse God. It's a darkness that causes physical torment, perhaps a profound spiritual despair made manifest, trapped in the heart of the beast's failing kingdom.
Horrifying. That brings us to the last 2 plagues, the grand finale.
Pretty much. The 6th plague involves the drying up of the Euphrates River to prepare the way for the kings of the East, leading towards the final battle, Armageddon. But the 7th plague is the real culmination of physical destruction. A voice from the temple in heaven shouts, "It is done!" And then comes the greatest earthquake in human history. Nothing like it ever before.
How bad is it?
It splits the great city, likely Jerusalem, or perhaps symbolizing global civilization's hub, into 3 parts. The cities of all nations collapse, islands flee away, mountains are leveled, utter topographical chaos.
Total reshaping of the planet.
And if that wasn't enough, giant hailstones, each weighing about a talent, roughly 100 pounds, rain down from the sky, crushing everything left. It's the final catastrophic dismantling of the physical world as we know it.
Okay, yeah, it's crystal clear why the saints need to be removed before that starts.
Absolutely. And their removal, that first resurrection at the 1335-day mark, is seen by the sources as the ultimate fulfillment of Jesus' promise that the days of tribulation would be cut short. Ronaldo Gamma Zero for the sake of the elect.
How so? If the tribulation under view 1 lasts the full 42 months, how are the days cut short?
The cutting short isn't necessarily about reducing the duration of the beast's persecution, the 1260 or 1335 days they endure. It's about cutting them out of the final, most horrific phase.
Ah, they're spared the 7 plagues.
Exactly. They escape the third woe entirely. Since the 7 plagues are arguably part of the overall 7-year tribulation period, by removing his people before that final outpouring of undiluted wrath begins, God effectively cuts short the full experience of that period for them.
Their trial ends, and they're safely removed just in time.
Just in time, pulled out into the air before the worst judgment falls. The persecution they faced ends at day 1335, right as the 7 plagues commence for the wicked left behind.
So the sequence is clear. Abomination starts the clock. Saints endure 1335 days of tribulation. First resurrection removes them. Then the 7 plagues fall on the wicked for the remainder of the 7 years.
That's the timeline constructed by the sources. And the conclusion of those 7 plagues finally brings the physical return of Christ to the earth. Tangirokajiya Masinda.
Not just to the air this time, but all the way down. To rule.
To judge and to rule. This is when the leaders of the rebellion face immediate justice. The beast and the false prophet are captured.
Then what happens to them?
No trial. They are thrown alive directly into the lake of fire. The Yuwangu Batnunma.
Wow. Instant judgment. What about Satan?
Satan himself is bound, chained for 1,000 years, ilchen neon dongen gilbagayo, and cast into the abyss, the bottomless pit, removed from the world stage for the duration of the millennial kingdom.
Which brings us back to why that 1335th day is blessed.
Exactly. It's blessed not just because it's the day of deliverance from tribulation, but because it's the gateway to inheriting the promised 1,000-year kingdom. The Chianyan Wangukul Sangsuk Batch Duil Geos Igitamanita. It marks the transition from endurance to reward.
A stark contrast to the fate of the wicked.
Utterly. For those who took the mark, endured the plagues, and now face judgment, the sources describe the lake of fire as something even worse. A final, absolute destruction of spirit, soul, and body, myologel sekinuan simpaneta, judged for their deeds with no reduction in penalty. #tag the eyes. Conclusion and final insight.
Okay, this has been incredibly detailed. We've navigated a really complex prophetic map. Let's try to synthesize the absolute core takeaways from this deep dive.
I think the main point of contention remains the start date of the Great Tribulation specifically for the saints. Is it the full first 42 months, view 1, or just a few days at the midpoint, view 2?
And the sources we examined lean heavily towards view 1, right? Based on the need for a substantial testing period and the timing of the two witnesses and Michael's intervention.
Yes, the theological and narrative structure presented in these sources really seems to require that longer 42-month period of persecution for the saints to fulfill its described purpose.
But, and this is crucial while the start might be debated, the end point for believers seems fixed.
Absolutely fixed. Regardless of whether the tribulation starts on day 1 or day 1261, the sources agree. It ends for the saints with the first resurrection, the rapture.
And that event occurs exactly 1,335 days after the abomination of desolation is set up and the daily sacrifices cease. That countdown is certain.
That countdown is the key certainty offered. Once those specific trigger events happen, the clock to deliverance is running, 1,335 days.
Which suggests the tribulation isn't just random suffering. It has a defined purpose and a defined endpoint related to the believers themselves.
Precisely. It's framed as the ultimate crucible, the means by which the saints demonstrate their unwavering faith under maximum pressure, thereby sealing, as the sources put it, the truth of the commandments. It's the final validation of their commitment.
So the first resurrection isn't just God arbitrarily deciding time's up. It's time to coincide with the completion of that test for the body of believers on earth.
That seems to be the implication. It's the signal that the necessary threshold of faithfulness and endurance has been met by the elect. Their readiness triggers their removal, which then clears the way for the final judgment, the 7 plagues to fall on the unrepentant world.
Wow. Okay, so the precision of that 1,335-day count, it concludes exactly when the elect are perfected through that trial.
And that moment of completion immediately unleashes the final phase of God's wrath.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought, doesn't it? Something for you, the listener, to really chew on.
If that 1,335-day countdown is precisely calibrated to end when the saints have successfully passed their ultimate test, proving their faithfulness,
what does that imply about the relationship between the collective spiritual maturity or perfected obedience of God's people and the timing of final divine justice on the world?
Is the pouring out of final judgment somehow contingent not just on God's sovereign schedule, but also on the demonstrated readiness and fidelity of the remnant? Does a certain level of collective spiritual completion need to be reached before the final rat can justly fall, ensuring the righteous are definitively separated from the judgment reserved solely for the wicked?
A fascinating connection between human perseverance and the cosmic timetable of judgment. Something to definitely ponder. Thank you for joining us on this very intense deep dive.